let's jump right in. And let me just tell you, I'm Burnadette Norris Weeks, and Kathy and Michelle will introduce themselves in just a moment. But they're my partners in everything great, everything that I do in terms of business and fun. They're right there with me. So you'll meet Kathy. They're also co-founders of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, which is an institute, a leadership institute with the focus to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. That is our mission. And so tonight we're really pleased and honored to feature in our first virtual meeting, Miss Xernona Clayton, who many of you have heard about. Kathy's going to give a bio about her. And for those of you who don't know Xernona Clayton or know the name, I don't know where you've been, but you'll learn a lot about her tonight. And she's really a tremendous leader and one of our National Women of Color Advisory Board members, of which we are so thankful. So I want to tell you how you reach us at the Institute, where Kathy is right now. You reach us by going online to nationalwomenofcolor.com. Again, that is nationalwomenofcolor.com. And you can also reach us by dialing 954-900-3494, but don't do it right now. but do save the number 954-900-3494. And now we will go ahead and turn it over to Kathy. And at the very end, we want to give you a little bit of information about the Women of Color Empowerment Institute. We do a lot of programming, as those of you who are aware, in the Atlanta area and also in South Florida throughout the year. And we are not going to stop doing our programming, delivering meaningful leadership experiences and connections for women of color just because we're dealing with this coronavirus. We're going to keep it moving, and that's what we do. We're resilient, and we want to certainly express our gratitude again for Ms. Xernona Clayton. So I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Bernadette. Hey, everyone. This is Kathy Eggleston, one of the directors of Women of Color, and I could not be more excited to introduce literally our woman of the hour for the next hour, Ms. Xernona Clayton. I'm going to tell you a few things that you probably already know because, as Bernadette said, she's one of our National Advisory Board members, and she's been one of our keynote speakers, but maybe a few things that you didn't know. For example, did you know Ms. Xernona Clayton was born in Oklahoma? She completed her undergraduate degree at Tennessee State, and then graduate studies took her to Chicago. She jumped right into the movement for civil rights in Chicago, investigating employment discrimination for the Chicago Urban League. And when she moved on to Atlanta, right away, she became a key player in the movement to desegregate hospitals there. She was active in the NAACP, met Dr. and Mrs. Martin Luther King Jr., and helped to organize some of the first initiatives to support the new organization that was formed in the wake of the Montgomery bus boycott, of which Dr. King became its first president, a little organization called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Now, simultaneous to all of this, she was forming her own career in broadcasting and journalism. Ms. Clayton was the first Black woman in the South to host her own regular primetime talk show. She became a cable TV pioneer alongside Ted Turner in his organization, producing documentaries. She had her own public affairs show, and ultimately she became a corporate vice president in the Turner organization in charge of public affairs and urban affairs. Now, in 1993, Ms. Turner formed one of the keynote programs of her career, and we're all so grateful, the Trumpet Awards, which to this day honors the pinnacle of African American achievement. And over the years, the Trumpet Awards have been broadcast in more than 185 countries. So again, a superstar, a legend, And for the next hour, she belongs to no one but us in the Women of Color Empowerment Institute. So thank you so much. Ms. Xernona Clayton is with us.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, Michelle is clapping, and I'm sure we're all clapping quietly. And if I had a drum roll, I would roll it out right now. But we're going to jump into our questions. We're, again, really super excited. And Ms. Clayton, we're living in an unusual time right now at the height of a national pandemic where many people feel uncertain about their future. They feel anxious about their future, not knowing whether they're going to go back to jobs or businesses. And you are someone, you're someone who has been through a lot of different experiences, and you've come out on the successful end of those experiences. And so we want you to share with us some of the advice that you may give, and this is called Words of Wisdom from Xernona Clayton. So some advice that you may give to women who are a little bit anxious about what we're going through right now in today's times. And we'll turn that over to you for you to address the attendees tonight.
Well, thank you so much. And let me express so seriously and sincerely how delighted I am that you've chosen me to kick this off at this particular time. And I want to congratulate you, Burnadette, and your cohorts in the movement who have come up with this great idea, this Women of Color organization. And I'm familiar with some of yours projects and activities and the people involved, and I'm impressed. So thank you for inviting me to be in the presence of, although electronically I still am in the presence of all you wonderful women. I commend all of you. Now, I don't know about you, but I have met people, and I'm still meeting people who have some doubts about there is a God. Now, anybody who has those doubts and are living right now ought to be changing their minds. Man is not in control of what's happening to our world at this point. You can't kill off a world, create an environment, that which we're living in now, unless there is a superpower. I believe in God. I believe there's a message here. I really do. I just think that we've left the mantle of reality when we don't love each other, when we find reasons to dislike people, find reasons not to praise the good Lord. I think that there's a message here that we ought to kind of change our thinking and realize that God is in control. And that's what I want to say about where we are at this point. And we need to return. If we left God, we need to go back. Whatever we're doing is not right. We need to find a better way and a quicker way to do right. Now, I'm no minister, so I just threw that in for whatever it's worth. This is a moment when we are being tested, I think. I know each of us in your own communities are going through the same thing. We all are going through the stores now have lines drawn where you form a distance for safety. And I was in Walgreens the other day, and I was on my line, and a woman came in and got in front of me. Well, I wasn't going to shoot her and kill her. I knew she was wrong, but we were all going to get waited on. They wait on you in turn. It's a system now that seems to work in all the stores. But when she got to the cash register, the clerk said, "Miss, you can't get waited on unless you're standing on the line. And then she preached the woman a sermon and carried on, so she just danced a jig and acted crazy. And I said, Miss, couldn't you be a little more tolerant? And I said, of course, you just jumped in front of me, but I didn't shoot you. I didn't react. This is no time to be difficult, challenging, ugly. And I calmed her, and then she apologized to me, and then I said, it's okay, really, because I'm going to be next, and it's all right, but they're going to take us all. But tolerance can just make the difference in how your day goes. She made a big to-do over just jumping and evading the rules. I know that, well, we all know that we're all in this together, that we're all inconvenienced together. And what I see, and I'm preparing now some speech, whenever I get a chance to make it, about love. I think we've lost it. When you look at everybody now, it's going through the very same thing. So we're all in this together. We are forced to treat everybody right because everybody's being treated the same way. And we're all the same right now. It won't last, I know that. That's not the reality. But I'm seeing some virtuous outcome, hopefully predicting that we'll have some after this. But I think we ought to return to God. Now, I took too long to answer that, but I got on those soapbox because that's the way I feel. So next question.
All right, let me go ahead and ask you a question, Ms. Clayton, and you did not take too long to answer that question. That's exactly what we needed. I want to ask you about leadership. And just in going through your bio, you've been in so many situations where you were the first, a definition of leadership, but you've also been in so many situations where you needed to collaborate to make change happen. And a lot of us are seeing in our business lives and in the world today that employees are scared and they're looking to their formal leadership, but leadership are facing some unprecedented questions. And now more than ever, people need to get together to collaborate to figure out where we're going and what needs to happen. Can you give us some tips on how you managed to get people to collaborate as a leader when you knew change needed to happen?
I want to tell you all that Kelly, Tracy, I'm sorry, was the one who set me up here today. And we were talking while we were waiting to go on about some of the challenges of leadership. She told me the exciting plans that her chapter is going through and are planning for the future. And I'm excited because I said to her, you've got vision and you're doing some great planning and you've got strategy. And I got caught up in what she's planning to do with the group here. But that's what it takes, I think, an excitement about change. You've got to have a verve for vitality to proceed to the next step. And you got to be willing to take the leadership. And I think that's what this organization is just filled with women who are already leading, but we can always learn something more. But Burnadette and some of the rest of you too have heard me talk all the time about staying ready. And I think this will probably pierce a little of your thinking on the question you asked. I look back, and in college, I majored in music and education. And um, I have gone on a career path that didn't involve either one of those. I didn't teach, which was a direction that I could have gone in. Um, I could have been a musician. Well, I've done some of that with church choirs, but I've gone in another direction altogether from what I studied in college. And I sat sometimes and said, oh, how did I get into this? And when am I going to get into my major field? And I realized that when I step up to the plate and volunteer or get myself involved in an issue because I feel the spirit to do so, I ended up going 100 miles an hour. If I feel, I'm going to act. And I found that when I take an examination of my career, and that's about this time every year because I'm nearing my birth, and I expect you of what I've been doing. You know, Dr. King said it doesn't matter how long you live, how well you live. And I've tried to figure out, well, gee, each year, did I do well last year? And I picked out to go the next year.
I think we may be having some technical difficulties, but if I had to wrap that up, I think you have to be willing to change. And what I heard in that is staying ready and how important staying ready really is. Now let's see if we have Ms. Clayton back, because I wanted to follow up on Kathy's leadership question with the question specifically about Dr. King, because I know that Mr. Xernona Clayton was a close friend and confidant of Dr. King and Coretta Scott King. And I specifically want to know, Ms. Clayton, what leadership skills, since the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, of course, a lot of what we do is focused on leadership and leadership training. What did you see in Dr. King that you believed set him apart as a leader from other people that you have come across throughout the years?
Dr. King never jumped in the streets. And I challenged the Black Lives Matter organization initially because they jumped out. They had a desire and they jumped out and didn't win all their hopes for victory for the project. But in living with Dr. King, he never went just out in the streets. He planned every movement. He planned every strategy. He planned and discussed everything before he took the leap. And then we ended up being successful. And I learned along the way that plan it well and will implement well in the end. And when I saw that in him and he practiced it all the time, it was just the way of life for him. Don't just act. Find out what it is, set the goals for what you want, see what the needs are, and then proceed. I think sometimes people get happy about an idea, and it may not work because it hasn't been thought out. I think you have to plan. You can get excited, but then have something to back it up so that you can move forward with some plan of action and some results in the end. So I was impressed with him all the time. And the man practiced what he preached. He had a preachments of honesty, goodwill, verve, vitality, get up, change your environment, eliminate the wrongs and the ills of our society, and you make the difference as to what happens. And it's almost like even today that he still talks to me. I feel his presence all the time, and that sounds maybe morbid to some, but I think had such a strong influence on me because I saw him at work, that I think he'll be with me forever. So I think leadership requires an excitement, but you got to have a plan and you got to follow through. You just can't get in it and jump from one thing to another, but try to have a beginning, the middle, of course, an end, and hope for the results and get the results that you desire.
And I can certainly attest to the fact that you probably have a lot of time and reason to feel that you're still very close to Dr. King, because the friends that you keep, like Andrew Young and John Lewis and so many others who were involved with the civil rights movement in Atlanta and all over the world. And we thank you for your efforts. Now we'll turn it over to Michelle. I know that she has a few questions for you, Ms. Clayton.
Ms. Clayton, you know, during this time of COVID-19, vulnerable communities are the ones most likely to be harmed or harmed more than the average community. And those vulnerable communities tend to be the Black and brown communities. What we have as a problem with COVID-19, it has to do with pre-existing conditions, poor health outcomes. Those disparities have existed for a long time, but now we are also the providers of the essential services. We're the ones out there driving the buses, working at the supermarkets, and doing those things that create more exposure for us. How can we as women leaders advocate for our community in these difficult times? What can we do to contribute in some way?
Well, thank you for that question. Because I resented the presidents of the United States who acted with shock and surprise when they revealed that the African American community was impacted so greatly. And he even, his agitation was just so vivid. He said, well, I'm going to do something about it and I'm going to do it now. Well, he shouldn't have been surprised. That lets us all know he had no knowledge of our existence. Every day, we're going to end up being victims because of our lifestyle. And you just pointed out some of the reasons. I remember working in a model cities community, trying to make change with fair housing. And I visited in the homes of some of the people with whom I was working. And they had the dresser drawers pulled out. And I saw blankets and I just asked what the blankets were there for. They said, oh, those are the kids, the babies' beds. The rats were so big in the apartment that they couldn't sleep on the floor or in a normal bed. They made a bed because of crowded conditions and then the rat infested environment. I'll never forget that. I've been trying to get a handle on that ever since then. But that's some of the conditions. It was just normal kind of existence for this family and then comparable families in the neighborhood. We've had those kind of conditions all the time. We have to eat the spoils of the food. We have to get the leftovers. We have to get substandard lifestyles in every way. So it's not surprising, and it shouldn't have been to the president, but they'll let you know where his knowledge is. It was. But maybe if he's changed by that, that's a good thing. That maybe he was embarrassed by that, and as the leader of our nation, maybe it'll spur him to look into it and see what the reasons are, because obviously he didn't know, but they weren't surprising to us who are African American.
Ms. Clayton, I would just like to ask you, what can we do though? What can we do as a group? Is there anything that you'd recommend we do to advocate for this community that is suffering more than?
Yes, I can offer a couple of suggestions. One is we got to cooperate with the system When they issued the edict that we should all wear face masks because it'll retard the spreading, hopefully, of the germ. Well, I went to the store, and I live in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and so many of the people didn't even have masks on. And some people just defy because it's the rule, they just don't want to support it. That's one thing, we can get rid of the ignorance of that. If that seems to be a causation, then we need to encourage our people to do it. When we talk about voting, your vote matters. How many times do you have to say that? But I'm telling people now that even if you don't vote, your vote is counting, because your absence may put just the person in you really didn't want. So we've got to educate our people every place we go, every opportunity we get, about the serious side of our lifestyle, not the bemoaning fact that we have poor conditions. I think about, again, Dr. King, when we knew that Black people couldn't send their children to better schools even when they could afford it because of the Fair Housing Act was not enforced. And Dr. King continued to work on that. We passed the Fair Housing Bill. So now people can live in better neighborhoods where they can get better schooling, hopefully. So we got to change our conditions. We don't have to stay where we are. We got to help ourselves get out of this pitfall of treatment. But segregation has done such harm to our society that there's a lot of work to do. And one of them is, I just mentioned, is the vote. And we want to be sure that people who make the laws that govern our conditions will be the ones we want. But we got to do maybe door-to-door education. I think little neighborhood gatherings. I did it once where we were talking about, I was dealing with another issue specifically about why is it that white people wanted to run when Black people moved into the neighborhood. And I learned so much from that project. And I'm just going to share one thing with you. One of the persons, and I encouraged and insisted on the honesty of their expressions. And so one night we had an audience of about 200 people, Black and whites. And I asked the question that I always did: why are you afraid when a Black person moves in next door to you? And the one woman who was honest enough, a white woman, who said, well, if my new neighbor is Black and there's a boy living in the house, we have a daughter in our house, and they may grow up, fall in love, and get married, and I would just absolutely die. Well, we weren't supposed to register any shock. Of course, I was shocked all the time, but I didn't register it. But one night we had about 350 people present, and I just asked the question, how many of you in this audience are married? And almost all of them were. And I said, how many of you married your next door neighbor? And not one person did. Then we had that as a beginning for opening the discussion. You know, fear makes you do a lot of crazy things. The fear that the boy next door might not fit your daughter's love aspirations. Well, the white one may not either. So we don't need to put everything on color, and the quicker we can get rid of Black versus white in America, that's when I think some of our problems will be solved. I think that's a long time coming, but I'm optimistic. I've lived through changes, so I've seen some changes. I've been responsible for some changes. So I'm not going to be pessimistic about it, but it's such a strong wish for me that I wish everybody loved everybody. regardless of color. And that's just a wish list, but I'm not going to give up on it because I'm an example of change. And Burnadette knows, and maybe some of the rest of you know, the story that I use all the time is one of my prime examples. If I can change the habits and the life of a man who's a Ku Klux Klanner, not only just a member of the organization, but he was the Grand Dragon, which means he was the head of the organization. And he and I were put together through a programmatic approach, one of the civic groups. And we worked and saw each other every day. And it was he listening to me, talking all the time about how idiotic it was and how silly it was and how baseless it was that he had these attitudes about Black people. And he was a Christian. He was a deacon in his church. And I couldn't understand how a man who had children who were passing this bigotry on to the next generation, being a Christian, how he could follow through on those kinds of feelings. And I think that was the beginning point of his change. And it was one day he called a press conference and announced that he was coming out of the Klan, denounced the Klan, and credited a Black woman with changing all of his attitudes. And I was that Black woman. I'll always live with that example because I saw that it could be done because it was done. I feel good about it to this day, and that was several years ago. But I think we shouldn't give up on people. We shouldn't give up on our conditions. We should not give up on the fact that our Black people don't vote. We got to educate people to see to that their children see you of following through on good citizenship. And so you're passing good habits on to the next generation. And I think if we just go door to door and have neighborhood chit chats, we can change attitudes.
Ms. Clayton, we talked about the Trumpet Awards, and there are a lot of people who have seen the Trumpet Awards and how it celebrates Black success, but we don't know what caused you to pursue that and have a Trumpet Awards. What is it that made you create it?
I'd sit at home, turn the television on several years ago, and I'd see Black people when they did come on TV, acting like buffoons, clowning, using dirty language. And I just said, oh, gee, I'm so sick and tired of this. Why can't I see my people in a better light? There's nothing wrong with comedy, but I didn't want it all the time. I'd like to see somebody, I knew people who had some sense, people who were articulate, people who had been doing great things in our society, in spite of the fact that we as a people were held in servitude, but we were still making contributions, but nobody knew it. I remember when I was a kid, Black history, I knew about 3 people, Frederick Douglass, Mary McLeod Bethune, and that's about all we had. And so I knew very little about it. I lived in a Native American community. My mother was mixed, and I learned a lot about the Indian culture. So I could make beads out of corn, and I could do a lot of arts and crafts because we did it in the schools. Knew nothing about my own race. But I just said, I'm complaining. And here I work in an environment that I had access to television. I had a good boss, Ted Turner, who I thought would buy my ideas. And I just said, I want to make the change here. I'm going to create a program that has dignity and achievement attached to it. And then I came up with a plan, like Dr. King did, and then went to my boss, Ted Turner, and said, I've got this idea. This is what I want to do. Will you back me? And then can I do it? And will you support it? And will you pay for it? And I gave him all my details, and he loved everything I had to say. He bought it. We went on the air. I had a lot of ground rules. The one is that everybody who came to our program would have to dress. I wanted people looking spiffy. I also wanted to be sure that all of our honorees were worthy of honor, not just some neighbor you liked, but who had really done something. And Dr. King also said, and I remember so well, that he didn't feel that all white people hated Black people because they loved to hate. It was just thinking that some of them hated them because they just didn't know of the contributions we'd made. And so we got to help teach them and open their eyes. And I felt like this program I was concocting here was going to be an eye-opener for white people as well as Black. No profanity, and I wanted children involved, and I wanted to be free, invitation. And Ted Turner was going to pay for it. Well, the first show, I hit the ground running. From that one show, I got sponsors like Norris because the women were just dressed beautifully. And so the idea of looking good, so we didn't all look like we were just got out of the streets. No profanity, we knew that, everybody knew that. Everybody spoke English, not Ebonics, but English. And I had the rules that I was going to enforce because I could. And that was the secret to my success. The first night, the show aired a week later, but the first airing of the show got me a response from the federal government. The military, I've forgotten the name of the organization, but they did all the program. They sent programs, television programs to the military men, Americans all over the world. He came to me and he said, "I like your program. I want to put it in our lineup." And after the first show, I went to 185 countries around the world. It became an international success right away. My ground rules held, and I did it for 25 years and got people. It was the hottest ticket in town. People came here from all over the world to attend the Trumpet Awards. And people didn't realize we had things around us all the time, just like the defibrillator. I have trouble saying that. But in every hotel, airport in the world, there's a defibrillator. It was designed by a Black man. So if you got a heart attack, think you're having one, just reach over, there is one in the airport, done by a Black man. And the list just goes on and on and on and on. And so I kept my standards high. I never varied. And I remember one night, one of my guests used a slight word. It wasn't real profanity, but a little word. He said, "Whoops, I forgot. You're not supposed to cuss on the Trumpet Awards." And everybody knew you couldn't cuss on the Trumpet Awards. And I see people today. I go to the service station, and a man just 3 weeks ago said to me, "Oh, Miss Clayton, thank you for taking all that profanity off of television." Well, I didn't do that. I just took it off the Trumpet Awards. But I wanted children to learn how to use English words, not profanity. And so I had a lot of unwritten rules, but they were clear that this was going to be a first-class production, and it has maintained its standards ever since.
Thank you for that. You answered everything as it relates to the Trumpet Awards. All of us are very interested in learning the why. Black success portrayed to all. Now I'm turning it over to Kathy because she has a few more questions for you, Ms. Clayton.
All righty, thank you, Michelle. And I think that we have a question or two from our audience members. So let's get into the audience questions, and folks can ask a question via typing into their chat box. And so Ms. Clayton from our audience, we have the question, how do we as leaders remain tolerant when dealing with the backlash of our own Black and Brown communities in regards to educating them about the global crisis?
Well, first you have to have that strong back so that you don't get weakened by somebody's criticism. Everybody's not going to like what you have to say. So just forget what they have to say. Try to get to hear what you have to say. And stick with it. And you'd be surprised how you can really kind of change people's attitudes only just with consistency. Just keep saying it, keep saying it. And then give them rationale, the reason. There's a reason why they want us to wear the masks. You know, they didn't just say, put on a mask. There's a reason. And so sometimes people don't understand why it is there's a rule, but explain it to them. And even when they get weakened and don't want to hear, just stick with it. Just don't you give up. Just keep on till you win.
And if I may, let me go ahead and ask a follow-up of my own to that. You have been in so many situations in which you were the first, you had a creative idea that had never been done, and this is including in corporate boardrooms. How did you advance your agenda and point of view as a leader to folks who had never had the idea and or, you know, were not necessarily waiting to receive your ideas?
Well, I can just say, I don't want to do anything that sounds like pomposity, but if someone gives me a story and I find out all the details on it and it makes good sense to me, I'm probably going to buy into it. When I realized when I was in Chicago with the job discrimination efforts, when major companies would buy a ticket to the NAACP dinner, but didn't hire anybody in their company, I knew that was wrong. And when the officers of the Urban League talked about that, we got to do something about it. I said, well, let me take that on as a leadership task. And what I did is I would get the one ad section and find out there's a clerk typist or whatever is available. A clerk typist at the time, this was in the 50s, that was a good job, always available, because if you could type and could spell, you could probably get a job. Well, I could type and I could spell. And so I applied for a job at one of the big companies, and I positioned myself, I was no more than 10 minutes away from the location. Called and said, I'd see you have the job, advertise it, is it available? Yes. Okay, I'll like to apply. Would go there in 10 minutes, walk in, and the lady would say, oh, I'm so sorry, but we just filled the job. In 10 minutes you filled it? Well, you don't slap them up in the face and beat them up. But if you wait till afternoon, call again and ask about the job that's in the paper, and they say, yes, it's available. And you try that again, after a while you realize that they were misleading you. So I did that enough that we exposed some major companies in Chicago who were on the surface looking like good citizens, but were failing to hire African Americans. And I was a leader in that and broke that down. But I like to take on challenges that have merit. When things are wrong, I want to help make them right. I just have that spirit in me that I want to do it. So I'm committed in my spirit to follow up on something that I think is wrong and ought to be made right. But I get all my business straight first. I always like to know what the facts are. I don't go in bullheaded. If it makes good sense to me and I've got the energy to do it, and the Lord has just blessed me, and I can just tell you all that I've been blessed. I'm going to be 90 years old in a couple months or so. And in my 90 years, I've never been sick. Never. That's a blessing from the good Lord. I've been a healthy person all these near 90 years. I've had my sanity most of the time. I'm sane 3 days a week, and I fake the rest of the week. And so the Lord has been so good to me that I just feel like I ought to use my energy and my thinkability for the good of humankind. So I'm just challenged by wanting to do. And then I don't stop in the middle of anything. I don't quit till it's solved. So I think we've got to, convince other folk.
Ms. Clayton, I've got to ask you, because we're getting comments on the screen when you said you were 90 years old. People just can't believe it. And so I'm going to ask you a little bit of a fun question, but it's also a question I want to ask anyway, because we're all trying to live and live vibrantly and live long and live healthy and do everything that we can to preserve ourselves to look like you. And you are a rock star, and I tell you that all the time. So tell us, if you would, share with these beautiful women who are on the line right now, what do you do? What's your secret? What do we need to do to be 90 years old and not taking any medication and looking like you?
Well, first, let me tell you a confession. I do nothing right. I can tell you, I don't eat right. I hardly eat. I think the Lord just says, we're going to take care of her because she doesn't have any sense in her head, so we're going to give her something else. And now that we've been pinned in the house, I started walking, and I think walking is fun. I started walking, but I lost 3.5 pounds, and I'm excited now because I'm going to be young, sexy, voluptuous, and good looking when my birthday does come. So when you all see me again, I'm going to look really, really good because I'm exercising by walking. But I don't do anything right. But I think what I really do? I've come up with my own set of reasons why. I think the Lord realized that I'm serious about doing what the good book says. I feed the hungry. I clothe the naked. I'm kind to people. And I was just reading the Bible this morning, and it said, love one another. Keep my commandments. I try to do that. I don't tell nobody else that you got to read the Bible. I'm not that religious about it. I'm not really a fanatic about religion. I'm just want to follow the good works of the man who's been so good to me. Lead a decent life. I had 2 wonderful parents. I was born into a great home, mother and a father who loved me and taught me. My mother whipped us all the time, me and my sister, because we do wrong. She said, there's a price you pay when you behave. It was all golly. So we thought that she was kind of mean until the sting would wear off on the whippings, and we realized she was just trying to make us do right. And she used to say, and keep your nose clean and keep your skirts on, you keep the clothes on. We didn't understand one thing. Well, we were scared to go to bed at night and take the clothes off. We didn't understand. She didn't explain all what she meant. We found out later what she meant. But having good beginning in my household with good parents, like don't join bad company, be responsible for what you do. And all those kinds of things I heard all my life. My mother and father have been gone for years and years and years. My father taught me, the story's too long to tell at this point, like running late. He says that when you run late, you are saying to the other person with whom you were to meet, you don't care anything about their schedule. And who would say that? I don't care that I made you late. I don't care that I made you miss something else. You don't say that, but your actions bespeak that. So now that I was 12 years old when you told me that, to this day, and here I am almost 90, I've never been late since I was 12 years old for anybody, for anything, and I don't let people make me late either. But I think it's a combination of my just trying to be a good person, because I'm serious about trying to be a good person. Um, I don't have an answer for this. That's just me. And I'm have to live my own life. And I would like to help you live yours if you need it. If you don't, just do like I do. Just keep on living and keep being kind to folk and try to make something of yourself and you'll do well.
You have another question for her, Kathy?
Do have another question, and I'll make this my last one, but I want to get this in. This is from one of our young members, and we have a whole range of leaders within Women of Color, Ms. Clayton, as you know. But we have a mentee program and a lot of young up-and-coming leaders, and they want to know, women of color still often face additional barriers in the workplace. Is there a moment when you had to deal with additional adversity? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yes, I did have, I had some dark days that were created by people with whom I worked. But the way I dealt with mine is I examined myself, am I coming up short? Am I doing something to cause this? Once I realized that I wasn't the causation here, that I'm doing my job, I'm doing it well, and I'm gonna try to act like I'm gonna respect you for doing yours. I think it's an attitude. I knew that, I remember, and you all probably remember when we first started with the women's movement, we had this thing that women didn't want to be called honey and sugar and sweetheart and so forth. And I said, listen, I don't care what they call me. I just want them to call me, because I had an attitude of self-sufficiency that when they call me, they're looking for an answer because I got the answer. I can give them the thinking. I can give them the roadmap. It's a self-assurance that I have, I think, that has carried me over the hurdle. And while I had some experiences, I didn't want them to know if they'd gotten to me. So it's sort of like I protected myself against their hurting me, or they didn't know they hurt me. But I realized that they would have to be taught at some point that I didn't choose to be Black and they didn't choose to be white. We didn't have choices. None of us did. And so don't make that a problem for me because it's a problem for you. So I'd give a lecture when I had the opportunity, and I made sense to some people, but I acted like I had a buffer and a protectorate around my shoulders that said, you're not that person. When you called an ugly name, that's not you. So I have a self-sufficiency that has carried me over. I think that I feel good about myself because first, let me see if I'm right. I always like to check to see if I'm right. If I'm right, I just proceed and then try to buck the fact that you didn't get to me. So in race relations thing, I just never let it be the problem that was mine. I let them know you got the problem, not me.
What I would like to take advantage, since our time is quite limited now, I would like to be able to share with you all a few nuggets of what we've learned from this extraordinary woman, things that maybe you take note of it, you'd like to leave with that as just something to live by, because she's given us some great words. One of the things we've learned tonight is that in uncertain times, like what we're dealing with now, it's important to return to God, return to love. When asked about leadership and what it takes to be a true leader, we've learned from Ms. Clayton that you have to be excited about a change you want to make and then act upon it. That's how you lead. And it's planning, it takes planning, it's strategic. So you look at your last year and say, hey, what did I do last year? Did I do well? and then look forward to the next year and do the adjustments that you need to have a better year next year. We've learned that Dr. King was a true leader because he was not just excited and jumped into the streets, but that he planned. He was deliberate, he planned, and since he planned well, he implemented well, and he got results. And if we are victims, and we can view ourselves as victims because we've suffered so much as a group, as a community. But in a time of crisis like today, what we can do for our community is to teach the community that we need to cooperate with the system in order to survive. The system is now telling us that masks are important for our health and for the health of others. We can teach our community about wearing masks. Advocating around voting is also very important because in order for us to have a better outcome, we need better representatives. And interestingly, Ms. Clayton told us that we should not give up on people, not give up on the possible, and that even if we're facing discrimination, we can hope and work on equality by working on changing others, like she was able to do with the KKK example. And the Trumpet Awards that we can all be proud of was a show that came to life because Ms. Clayton wanted us to be not viewed as mere comedians, but viewed as individuals with dignity and individuals who have achieved. And she's asked us to develop a strong back, not to succumb to criticism, to take on challenges that have merit, and to follow up on them. She brought us back to the basics. If you want to achieve, if you want to look like her at 90 and be healthy, it's important to think about the basics. The basics are being serious about being a good person, feed the hungry, love your neighbor, keep the commandments, and that would help you overcome adversity. And finally, one of the most important things I heard tonight is that when you're overcoming or attempting to overcome adversity in the workplace or in this business, anywhere, you start by self-analysis to know whether you're actually being dumped on or whether you are right or wrong. So you look at yourself, and once you get to where you need to be to know that you are being right, the next step then is to develop that self-confidence, that resilience, that self-assurance, that self-sufficiency that provides a buffer so that going forward, you're capable of handling any adverse situation as a strong Black woman. We thank you so much, Ms. Clayton, for sharing these words of wisdom. And I know just by reading the notations on the screen that our audience agrees.
Yes. Ms. Clayton, you have been phenomenal. You've been just what we thought you would have been, no less than an hour of true power with a true leader, talking about leadership skills that will lead us through this pandemic and on into the future. I'm Burnadette Norris Weeks. I'm here with my partners in crime, Kathy Eggleston and Michelle Austin Pamies. And actually, Michelle is also my law partner. So we do practice law during the day. Michelle reminds me every now and then. But we're here representing today the Women of Color Empowerment Institute. And it is a national organization. We are inviting you, if you are tuning in from areas other than Atlanta and South Florida, to go on to our website, nationalwomenofcolor.com, learn more about our organization. We are an organization for leaders. Our mission is to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. And we have a lot of programming just like this that we bring to our members. We are membership based, but there are a lot of other things that we do throughout the community, whether it's dealing with voting issues or leadership training or helping people to learn to run for public office or you name it. We run the gamut in terms of leadership development, technology issues. We covered it all. One of the things that I have behind me is a sign for the Women of Color Empowerment Conference, which we hold every year. Many of you may know about us through the conference. We invite and have about nearly 1,000 women who, over a 3-day period, for different events that come in from all over the country, I should say the world really, because we have a lot of people from the Caribbean who also come to our conference. And we have just a 3-day action-packed, powerful leadership conference. This year we're scheduled for October the 2nd through the 4th. And we're hoping that the coronavirus and its effects don't interfere with that this year. But you can go online right now at nationalwomenofcolor.com, register for our conference, and we look forward to seeing you not only with this but other programming. On our website we have various information about different things that we're doing, to include but not limited to our teleprofessional network, where you can, if you have issues in leadership through employment, through different things that you may be struggling with, we have access to so many leaders in so many different areas, and we can put you in touch with people who can offer advice and support. And we want to be that supportive arm. Look, please do go to our website within the coming weeks and months, because we will be uploading all kinds of programming from various conferences and other programs that we do throughout the year. We've been doing this for 10 years now. So this really 2020 marks our 10th year anniversary of the conferences and our programming, and we're so proud of it. Ms. Clayton, I just want to say again, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom, which Michelle summarized so well, as she always does. And we appreciate the support of our members. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you to our mentees for coming online. Although we didn't have our regular scheduled dinner tonight, we brought you this, and we hope that you've enjoyed it. And Ms. Clayton, would you like to say any parting words to the folks on Facebook Live and on Zoom, and however you may be joining us this evening?
Tell Michelle I'm gonna call her the next time I have a speech to make, because she did so well. I like what she said. I don't think I sounded that good, but thank you very much. But I want to say to all of you women, I know a little bit about some of the great things you do, and I want just to encourage you to keep going and don't stop. You're going to find people going to get in your way, but just move them out of the way. Just keep going. Because you're going to make some changes that will be spectacular in our society. And I want to commend you now for what you already have done, and wish you well for what you will do. Congratulations to each of you.
Thank you, Ms. Clayton.
Thank you, Ms. Clayton.
Bye-bye, everybody.